Welcome to Growing Pains, our ongoing conversation about the challenges of a thriving Sumner County. Before I start, I just want to extend our hearts and our prayers to those who have suffered, who are still suffering from Winter Storm Fern. She will go down in history for the path of destruction, and it's been a tough couple weeks. Members of our board have gone days and days without power. Some of our board have been out cutting down tree limbs, and others donating generators and blankets and coats and whatever we can to the shelters. Just trying to do whatever we can, but it's all just very heartbreaking. And I join you today with that heavy on my heart. Today is a recap of where we have come so far. We're going to take a look back at some of our most poignant excerpts from the previous episodes, and I appreciate you coming along for this. I am reading from a script, so I'm going to keep darting my eyes back and forth. Forgive me for that. But in any case, I'm going to start with a little context of our why. Growing Pains has a few key ambitions. One, it's to acknowledge that growth inevitably generates growing pains. Two is to educate, and three is to be a source of positive local media. On this first point, growth is painful in many ways, and traffic sucks. No way around it. I know acknowledging it doesn't fix it, but it does underscore the premise that a thriving community brimming with opportunity like ours, it doesn't come without those inconveniences. I think we all have a list of amenities that we'd love to see in our community. Some are just looking forward to the Target in Gallatin. I can't wait for us to get a Trader Joe's, and maybe there's restaurants on your list, and fill in the blank, whatever yours is. But it's important to realize that you don't get any of those things below a certain population or capacity threshold. And our elected leaders, they can't force them in any way to show up. I can assure you that a moratorium on residential growth is one way to stall any such investment. But in the meantime, I'll just go back to the premise or the point that growth is painful, and it's the yin and yang of the situation we're in. Now, on education, I think I always refer back to Paul Harvey. It's the rest of the story. We want to use this podcast as a way to dispel what's often, I think, a simple-minded assessment of our situation, shed light on how growth and governance really intersect. I love how in the episode with Paige Brown, she talked about how leading in her capacity, unfortunately, is not like a Girl Scout cookie order form, which, by the way, I cannot wait for those cookie order forms, so please send them my way. But my point here is of education is that a mayor or a city council cannot order up those amenities I just talked about. Capitalism, I think, can be a bit mysterious, and I think we would all agree with a conservative platform in mind that free markets are what enable economic vitality, and that hinges on thoughtful workforce development initiatives, all working hand in hand. That's why you'll hear us talk a lot about educational excellence and why it's such an imperative priority for our platform. Just remember this, that the free enterprise system, the system, not the politicians, but the system is the one that assesses the demand and determines if there's a business case to build a car wash, a check cashing place, all these great amenities, right? Or an apartment. It's up to them in the system to determine what makes sense economically. And it is that foundation that's truly the genius of the American dream. On the third point, I will say positivity is our jam. So let's work together to stay positive and build solutions together. Thank you for joining us each week on this journey. So here's some of our favorite clips, and we're going to start with founder of the Republican Freedom Caucus, General Dennis Cavan. And as you listen to him, I think this excerpt and other things we've posted about him, you will come to realize that his wisdom is profound. And I urge you to consider what he offers as his number one virtue as an Army general and see who embodies this principle, and that is to see and be seen.
We want to advocate for investment in infrastructure to support responsible growth. Growth is a big issue for a lot of people because you get in your car and you try to drive down to Gallatin from Hendersonville at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's almost like Washington, D.C. The gridlock is, so people get frustrated about that. I know there's some actions being taken to try to relieve that, but what we have to look for is not being negative about growth, but understanding that having a strategy for responsible growth that is accompanied by a plan for the infrastructure to relieve those kinds of issues is very, very important. And there are plans underway to do some of that. But growth is not a negative for Sumner County. It can't be. It's what causes new businesses. If you are a small company, a small business here, and somebody says, well, we're going to turn off inviting anybody to come and put their new company or their family here to go to school, that affects your bottom line. So as a business owner, you're absolutely wanting to ensure we have a solid plan for taking care of those that come to Sumner County. And look, if you go out and take a survey of all the people, you might say 30 people. Let's say we take a survey of 30 people. Half of them did not grow up in Sumner County. They came here for a reason. And that reason is either the great quality of education, the tremendous community that we live in, and leaders that care about them and their families.
One leadership principle that you would say you bring from your military background into all the roles that you've had in your civic life, is there just a common theme and a common principle there that you think guides you through your leadership?
For me, it all centers around character. A person's character is what you come into this world as a baby with a pure character. And the best you can hope for is when you go out, you'll go out with a solid character and your family around you. When my dad passed away, the funeral director came to me while I was there and he said, Dennis, you know, I've never heard a person say a bad word about your dad. Gosh, I can only hope that would be what somebody would say at my funeral about me. Or it's from a leadership standpoint, it is truly about character. And Omar Bradley had the best definition. And you know, more has been written about leadership than any other subject in America. There are thousands of books. It starts with the Bible, it starts with Colin Powell's 19 Principles, or it comes all the way down to Pat Summitt's book that she wrote on Rising to the Summit. So what's the one thing that I refer to on leadership? It was written by Omar Bradley. 4 words: see and be seen. What he was talking about is, if you're a leader, don't sit in your office. Get out and go on the floor where your employees are working. Talk to them, see what their interests are. If you're a leader on the battlefield, you're at the front of the battle. You're not at the back. You want to see how your soldiers are responding to the threats and the dangers of war. But while you're out there doing that, guess what? They see you. They know you care. And so it's a very simple principle: be involved, care, and give back to your community.
It was a great honor for me to sit with Senior Advisor to Governor Lee, John DeBerry. His episode has been watched all over this country. DeBerry talks about divisiveness, and he specifically calls out the lines of demarcation. His heritage in the civil rights movement is part of the story you'll hear in this little clip. But just think about how that pertains to the current division we see in national politics, and then consider again how it pertains to local politics. I think for many of you, you might not realize that these two, the national versus local situations, really present very different lines of demarcation. Don't hesitate to ask me to explain a little further.
Courage has definitely defined you, and I know that there was a speech that went viral that really changed the course of your service in the state legislature. Could you share a little bit about what that experience was and what you took from it, what you learned?
Well, because I had followed my father as a teenager and watched him as a younger person leave the family. I've told the story so many times. The family raised money in 1963. My father was our representative of our family to go to Washington, the March on Washington that Dr. King and others spoke on that day. It was a monumental day in the history of our country, I think, because it served notice on that day that the country would never be the same, that the status quo would never be satisfactory, that with the lines of demarcation between white and colored and rich and poor and the educated, the illiterate, that those lines were going to be removed, erased, to the extent that America lived up to its promise, which was part of Dr. King's speech. So, realizing that, I understand that my father taught me that something that was said all the time, if you don't find something that's worth sacrificing for, even dying for, then you don't find anything worth living for. So making that speech on that day, I had all of these things in mind. I heard people referencing the civil rights movement. They were referencing the marches of the 60s. And what they were talking about is a justification of burning buildings, burning classrooms, burning cars, pulling down statues and monuments that have been, that represented the history of this country. Folks were talking about the Washington Monument should come down, that the statue of Abraham Lincoln should be. It was a ridiculously crazy time, that particular year. And I did not walk on the floor of the House with the intention of making a speech or saying anything that day. As a matter of fact, I had concluded I was going to stay in my seat, keep my mouth closed, and basically get ready for the fight and battle I knew I was going to have to get reelected. But when I heard everything that my father, his generation, and others, the things that they had suffered for, the things that they had sacrificed for, put their life on the line on the Pettus Bridge, the Bloody Sunday, the marches in Memphis and all over this country, and then have a group of people trivialize it in comparing it to the chaos and anarchy that I was seeing, I was constrained to stand up. I didn't have anything written down. I basically said what was on my mind. I had no idea it had gone viral until someone told me. But the fact is, I said on that day what I believe my dad would say, what Dr. King would have said, what many men and women, black and white, who were there, who put their lives on the line, would have said in that time when we were watching that chaos in our country.
This next clip is Gallatin Mayor Paige Brown. Paige is a friend, and I'll admit feeling pretty protective of her and her legacy of service. She has led Gallatin from being a small town with very little opportunity, most graduates choosing to move away, and having a charming but fledgling city square, to now having a very vibrant hallmark setting and truly a new era for this city. I think Gallatin, I know Gallatin is often in the national spotlight for the investments being made here. And I kind of think sometimes that Paige might have been smart if she had retired after the exhausting term leading through the pandemic. But she didn't, because she cares too much about the future of Gallatin and this community to step aside. And she doesn't step aside from tough decisions. When we talk about growth, Paige shares this observation. It's happening everywhere. And I just want to point out that, a little fact here about the region. Believe it or not, because of our leadership, we have a very steady and, by comparison, very responsible level of growth. Wilson, Williamson, Rutherford counties. If you don't know those by name, I'm talking about like Mount Juliet, Lebanon, Brentwood, Franklin, and then Smyrna and Murfreesboro are Rutherford County. Those communities are at a breaking point. And that's my cat, Mayflower, and you can see her ears. But those communities that are a breaking point, far beyond what we are experiencing in Sumner County. There's her tail too. Again, I'm not saying that our growth isn't painful, but we're not alone. And even in Middle Tennessee, it could be much worse. Speaking of Gallatin, here you go. Yeah, the nicest place in America. I love saying that I live in Gallatin, which was the Reader's Digest first ever nicest place in America. But I read that article in here again for the first time in almost 8 years, and on the front cover, two other friends. You got Paige and Chief Don Bandy and Pastor Derek Jackson. Great people, and I love that in this little article in the Reader's Digest. A little shout out to Chief Bandy. He says, when you make yourself friendly, you have a better chance of making a friend. Of course, I love that. But really, the article is more about, and what's still true today, this was 2017, but what's still true today, the article talks about how leaders and citizens instinctively seem to put community ahead of themselves. And that is Paige Brown in a nutshell.
There's so many highlights when you look back just over the course of a year. There are a lot of projects, there's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot to celebrate. But you approached this one with a different edge of both awareness of all that, but a sense of urgency that standing still is not an option. So here we are faced with some serious challenges. So I know that you are the perfect person to join us on this episode or on this podcast talking about growing pains. Gallatin's seen a lot of it. So.
They have, and standing still is not an option. And to me, one of the most fascinating things, I was talking to a gentleman in the parking lot of the Food Line last weekend. He had no idea I was the mayor of Gallatin. He's lived here since the 80s, and which is interesting in and of itself, right? But he loves it here. But when I said, well, there's a lot of people who are really mad about all the growth, he's like, I deliver lumber all over the Middle Tennessee region. It's happening everywhere. And the reality is there is a mass exodus from other states to reach the goal that is now Tennessee. It's because of our cost of living. It's certainly because of our tax advantages. And I think COVID accelerated that, and it's created kind of this stack of problems that we could not have anticipated. And so we're all doing the best that we can. As at the same time, we're trying to bring quality investment to our community. I know people have this idea that if you stop building new housing, nobody else can move here. But the reality of that is my fear, because the reality of that is that our workforce, people that work for our city, that work for our schools, will be forced further and further and further out for somewhere to live until it's closer for them to work in Cookeville, or closer for them to work in Bowling Green, or closer for them to work in, I don't know, over in Wilson County, although Wilson County is experiencing the exact same thing we are. Last night I saw a report on the news, and I was like, oh, brother, it's the last thing I wanted to hear. But the projection is that Metro is not just projected to be 20,000 housing units short of the demand in 2040. They're projected to be 20,000 lots short. So they're talking about, how do we make density happen? And I know that a lot of people look at what's going on in all the cities around Middle Tennessee, and not necessarily everyone wants to live in a community where there's someone really close to you. I don't. Right. But some people really like that. I can remember, I don't think he'd mind me telling the story, but I can remember when Chief Beeman came to Gallatin from the Memphis area, and he was talking about looking for a home. And I said, well, what do you want? He says, I want something big enough that we're comfortable in, but not big enough that my boys are comfortable moving back into, and I want no yard. And so he was able to find that in the community here in Gallatin. He did not want a yard. And there are a lot of people that feel that way. Now, I think a lot of people that are coming to our community from other states, they may have lived more in a city, and they're used to being in apartments, and they're used to, and they think the idea of a yard or even a small farm is really, really attractive. It will be interesting to see how that plays out over time. Right. Because, once the lawnmower breaks and, the septic system fails and all the things that happen in those scenarios, you start thinking differently. At the same time, you're also aging, and there's a reality as to what you can do. I know one of the funniest things I ever saw on, I don't know, probably Nextdoor or something, it was a lady that had moved here from California, and she was living maybe in Castaigne Springs, and she had bought 5 or 10 acres. And she said that she needed somebody to come spray her land for critters. I don't know if that meant bugs or animals or what, and that she also needed to hire somebody to do something called bush hawking, bushhocking. So she bought this land likely because it was her dream. And of course, by now she may be like the best cottage farmer in Sumner County, and I wish that for her. But I think
The reality
what
is
we
different.
have here is very attractive, but the reality of living in different circumstances is sometimes harder than you think. I've talked a lot, sorry.
No, that's okay. I think there's a lot of things that most can relate to at one point or another. And your story about Chief Beeman, I could see evolving to that stage of life where I just don't want a yard or a pool or any of the hassles that come with any of it. And I do have friends that are retirement age, who have chosen that lifestyle. And I do envy the free time they have.
Did you know the third person in line to run this great state of Tennessee is Gallatin native, State Senator, Speaker Pro Tem Farrell Hale. Senator Hale is known throughout this state for his steady and reasoned leadership. That level of respect brings untold benefits to Sumner and Trousdale counties because of him. This full episode gives various examples, but what you'll hear here is Senator Hale talking about, at its core, a difference between spending and investment. And he's giving an example here that's very close to his heart, illuminating the type of decision-making that brings massive economic and humanitarian return on investment.
So how do you define smart growth in a conservative framework?
I think one word: business. I had a number of years ago, back 15 years ago or so, I had a debate with a gentleman from the opposite party that I was representing in the conversation, and we were talking about education at that particular point in time, but government in general. And he made a comment that you can't run government like business. And I just totally disagreed with that. I think that's absolutely the way government needs to run is as a business. It's a big business, and it needs to be dealt with carefully, conservatively. You've got to have end results, just like you do in a business. When you invest in business, you invest for a return on that investment. So I think it needs to be looked at that way. The most frustrating thing to me, one of the most frustrating that has taken place in the adjustment from the private sector as a business owner into the public sector as an elected official, is that in business, you made a decision on Monday evening, Tuesday morning, you implemented it. Well, government doesn't work that way. And our founding fathers, I believe, intentionally made it not work that way, because you don't need to be jumping from one place to another quickly. You need solid data, solid decision making, solid discussion going forth on that before you actually pull the trigger, so to speak, on what a new endeavor might be. I think later on we're going to talk about Safe Baby Court, and I can talk about how long that took and the details of getting that off the ground. Whereas I would have made that decision one day and implemented the next. That's not the way government works.
Well, and I suppose that is for the long-term good, but it is.
I believe it is. You get really frustrated at times by it, but I do believe it's in the long-term good. We don't want our state to go bankrupt, our county to go bankrupt, so you need wise business decisions involved in the process.
So I think you've already kind of touched on it, but let's just talk about there's a distinction between investment and spending. And voters or people might think that they're all one and the same, but how do you distinguish those two?
There's immediate gratification versus long-term stability. Is one way that I would say that. I'd say it's pleasure versus long-term expectations. And so when we talk about conservative ideas and then the difference between investment and spending, to me, that's the way you classify that. It's hard to define that, but I define it by the example that I used. I went to a couple of seminars that talked about adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. And when you go to our prisons and interview the inmates, they have a high number of ACEs. There's about 12 different categories of ACEs. It can be divorce in the home, abuse in the home, drug abuse, poverty, food insecurity, housing, jobs. There's about 12 of them. And when you go and interview inmates, those numbers are high. Yeah. They're really high. And a lot of that goes back to the home, what's taking place in the home. The brain development of an infant, from 80% of it takes place from 0 to 5 years old. When you have chronic ACEs, or chronic adverse childhood experiences, it affects that brain development and the learning ability of that child. So you see results of that in 3rd grade reading, and you just go right on up into the being incarcerated for many of these individuals. So if we can correct that when the child is young, from 0 to 5, then we have enhanced the opportunity. We've made an investment in that child's future for their adult, for them being an adult. So that, to me, that is a wise investment.
With economic impact. I mean, at the end of the day.
Economic impact all the way through for the community, for the family, for the child.
Do you know someone passionate about a cause? Well, imagine that times 100. No one is as passionate and articulate as founder and executive director of Grace Place Ministry, Deanne DeWitt. What I love about her episode and this clip here, when it comes to the cause and effect of growth and zoning decisions, everything that goes along with it, she really lays it out better than anyone. So don't hesitate to go back and listen to the full episode.
It's so often that, and even people in the community that might even be trusted community leaders will speak on topics, and it kind of makes me cringe because we, as a society at large, want to attribute homelessness, whether it's family homelessness, individual homelessness, we want to attribute that to some kind of moral failure. And not only is that so completely not factual and incorrect for so many reasons, but what we're experiencing in Sumner County with the population that Grace Place serves, these are working single mothers, okay? If they can't live in the community where they have become displaced because of rising rent costs, there is an effect that happens that creates so many different issues. And so when we have rent that has risen so substantially over the last few years, and we have families whose wages have not increased at that same rate, well, then we also have something like childcare and the cost of childcare that has skyrocketed. Well, and then we have, we're not a county that has public transportation. So if we have any kind of transportation issues, all of these things spiral out of control, and it leads a family to need the services that Grace Place provides. If a mom can't afford childcare, which, by the way, one child average monthly cost is $800.
Oh my goodness.
There's no way a mother making $15 to $20 an hour can afford even one child's childcare expenses. So if she can't afford childcare, she can't work. If she can't work, she can't afford a place to live. And so there's all of these issues. And so I have been trying, to just scream it to Sumner County elected officials, our neighbors, our people, our churches, our partners, and anybody in, Grace Place's network of influence. This is not a moral failure. This is a math problem. And we can't make 2 + 2 = 10, ever.
Right.
And so that I wish that people knew about our population and these issues. And then, the rental market is strangled. And I'm the person talking about growth in the way that nobody wants to talk about it, because I'm not talking about home ownership. I'm talking about the population of people who could never buy a home right now, and the population of people who have to rent. And when the supply is so little and the demand is so large, we end up in this situation where we have an entire population, our working, maybe our blue collar but low income earners who can't afford to live here, which hurts our whole economy.
Right.
And so there is a ripple effect that impacts us all, even if we don't know that we're impacted by it.
You've already touched on it a little bit, but
Yeah.
If you have some more anecdotes or stats or anything that kind of help drive this point home, I think the rental market is one that everybody just kind of they get nervy about, right? They see apartments and they just assume a lot of bad outcomes, bad traffic, and then maybe a population that they don't feel that they would associate with as easily. But talk about the supply that you've seen, because you've gone through helping your families rehouse.
I am not an advocate for just any old apartments to get built.
Right.
We have plenty of luxury apartments that nobody can afford to live in, that are sitting there open. I'm not talking about luxury apartments. I am talking about the affordable places that we could build here that would help a significant portion of our population.
Because that supply just doesn't exist.
It just doesn't. It doesn't.
As many as of them there are some.
That are needed. The amount of affordable living opportunities is greatly out of proportion to the number of people who need it here in our county.
And the population that you serve is one kind of unique population, but there's a lot of people that are in that same kind of income level that are first-time earners coming into the workforce.
Well, it's long-term earners. It's our firefighters. It's our police. It's our hospital workers that, aren't doctors or nurses. Every single thing, every industry that we have in Sumner County is touched by our low-income wage earners. It's just so funny, because you mentioned the mindset about apartments and how that is. And I'm just coming back to, and here's what I love about what I do. I do this for Jesus, period. I don't have to skate around issues. I can get right to the heart of things. Oh my goodness. Traffic is never getting better. You live in suburban America. Okay? I'm just going to be very real. But the fact that we would rather have families and children suffering and struggling the way that they are.
Yeah.
We get over 500 requests for our services a year. Those are just the ones calling us who know about us. Sumner County schools, the amount of children who are homeless or in transition. And we're going to act like our inconvenience over traffic is more important than those issues that are happening all around us. And not only are we going to do that, but then we're going to go raise our holy hands in worship on Sunday. All right? I can get right to the heart of things. This whole NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Right.
Oh
Right.
my goodness, it's going to hurt the value of our homes. Okay, first of all, there is no true statistical research that backs that argument up. Find it. If I'm wrong, I will gladly say that I'm wrong. But the fact that we would allow the condition of community members to be at this level of suffering and tragedy because we have this idea about who should live next to us. I just, you're going to go as a Christian, as a believer, you're going to go to these restaurants, you're going to get served by these people, you're going to be helped by these people in triage in the hospital, and you're going to behave a certain way, and you're going to be so grateful that we have these services. But then
Maybe
the other side of your mouth,
Yeah.
you're going to say, you can't be my neighbor. The only person who can be my neighbor is the person who can afford a house on a 1-acre lot. I just have a lot to say about what heaven's going to look like and how disappointed some of these people are going to be.
Well, again, there's a lot we could pick up on from those.
Are you sorry yet you invited me?
I am thrilled because you are a passionate advocate for a topic that a lot of people just don't know how to dig into, and you've got some very firsthand experience with it.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Will you please take a moment to share this with a friend or neighbor? I'm sure someone either needs to better understand a little bit about what's going on or could use a big dose of positivity. Till next time.